Let's talk about buyer fatigue. Now, when you're searching for a home, you're going to be really excited at the very beginning of that process. And you should be. It's exciting to think about what a new home will do for you, your family, and probably your pets if they're going to be coming with you. But the problem is, as you start searching, you're going to go out and see a bunch of homes. You're going to go to a lot of open houses. You might even write a couple offers that don't get accepted. And then there's going to come a point in your search where you're just feeling tired of it all. You're just saying, my goodness gracious, I feel like we're not making any headway here. I feel like, there's just a lot of stuff going on with this thing. I feel like we've taken every weekend to not do stuff with family or friends, and we're going out to see more houses. And it's becoming depressing because we're not getting the houses. And our agent keeps telling us that this market is so competitive and there's not a lot of inventory. And, what do we do? And you get frustrated, and you might even walk away from the opportunity of home ownership, of getting that home, whether you're getting a first time home or moving into that next home. You may just give up altogether because you just think this is too hard and I'm too tired of this process. So what I want to go through a little bit here is, what's that big problem? What are kind of the big three issues that I see? I would give you some ways probably I wouldn't go about solving them this way, but then I'm also going to give you my methods of how I think is the best way to solve those issues. And I'll give you a couple little extra little tidbits at the end just for some extra resources that you can use. So let's talk about the three main issues that I see. One, it's too narrow of a search. Two, you have a lack of context of what's actually happening in the real estate market. And three is something I'm going to call compounding. So let's unpack these a little bit as we go. Now, first, we're going to talk about how I wouldn't solve this. So let's just talk about the first one, and that's having too narrow of a search. So the pitfalls that you can get with a search that's too small is overbidding. And here's how that actually happens. So let's say you run a search for the first time with your agent, or you're on Zillow or Realtor.com or whatever, and you go to run that search and you have less than 25 homes appear. Now, 25 is kind of my stock number. I don't know. It's like a general rule of thumb number. You can ebb it up and down depending on your market, but for me, it's about 25 for our area. When I have a buyer and we run their initial search and there are 25 or less current homes on the market that match their search, in my best estimation, their search is too narrow. That's different than saying your search is wrong, right? No one's search is wrong. It's just that you're getting so hyper specific and particular about one outcome, you are potentially not seeing some of the great options that are just outside of your ideal search, right? So that's one of the first issues with pitfalls. When you want something that specific, a lot of times it has to deal with, you want something that's kind of right near a certain downtown area within a walkable distance, or you really want a certain school district and you only want a certain price point and amenities in that school district. Again, it's not wrong to want that. It's 100% okay to want that. But you also have to recognize, if it's that specific for you, especially in some really coveted areas, it's probably that specific for a lot of other people. Never underestimate how many people are willing to make themselves financially worse off in order to get one of those properties. There are people who will overpay $50,000 to $100,000 for a property just to say they're in that school district, in that little downtown walkable area, or add in XYZ, whatever thing might apply to this. So that's the first part, is when you get way too narrow. If you're a logically minded, fiscally minded, financially minded person, you're going to have a really hard time competing with somebody who's willing to throw caution to the wind, say screw it to their finances, and just go up way beyond what any reasonable person should do to get one of those properties. So what you need to really consider is saying, hey, if the opportunity still presents itself to get one of those homes in one of those areas, fantastic. I'll go for it. But at the same time, if I just don't have it in my stomach to shell out that kind of money and potentially go into a reverse equity position if you cover too much of an appraisal gap, you may want to broaden your search. So if you really want to do this wrong, keep that search under 25. I guarantee you, you will start to feel buyer fatigue. So let's go on to basically what I would consider the second biggest issue that we're going to have in this. And that's going in blind, right? You go into this search and you are on Zillow, you're on Realtor.com, you're on one of these websites, you just click on give me more information, or I want to see this home. And you get a call from an agent, from somebody that says, hey, I got your inquiry on 123 Main Street. Do you want to go out and see this maybe tomorrow or over the weekend? Oh, okay, I'll see it on the weekend. So you organize a time, you go out and you meet them. And then you meet with that agent. They might even be a good agent, but all you do is just immediately start seeing home after home after home after home after home. You're pre-approved and that's fine, but you just jump right in to just seeing a bunch of homes. There's no context there. You don't understand if, okay, I make an offer on this home and it doesn't go through. Did you learn anything from that? Maybe, maybe not. Did you understand kind of the ramp up? Did you understand how many days on market that is and what that means to you? Have you and your agent sat down and actually talked about what all that means? So when you start getting into this and you kind of go in blind, that is, you have no context for the situation. And here's the easy example I always give. Let's just do a thought experiment real quick. I'm going to say the number 100 and I'm going to ask you a question. Is that a high number? Well, if you're thinking of 0 to 100, yeah, that's the highest number you can get. And if you're thinking, well, there's 1 through infinity, so no, 100 is infinitesimally small compared to that. Well, who's right? Well, maybe both of you and also neither of you. You have no context. What if I said we're only looking at numbers between 98 and 102? Well, right? Versus I'm looking at every number in existence. So you see what I'm saying? You need to understand the context of how that sits in that number, that house, that bid, that proposal, how that sits in the context of the overall real estate market, right? So if you want to, again, be really frustrated and feel that buyer fatigue very quickly, get in, don't set up an initial meeting and just start looking at home ad nauseum one after one and pinballing all over the place. You will get buyer fatigue very, very quickly. So let's talk about the third big issue. And for me, this is something I call compounding and not compartmentalizing. So compounding and not compartmentalizing. When you go and you offer on a home and you spend 30 minutes or 45 minutes prepping that offer with your agent and you send it over, and then unfortunately a day or two later, you get that standardized email that we all get that says, "Hi, the seller appreciates your buyer's offer. Thank you very much for sending it. However, at this time, they have chosen to go with a different offer." And so you sit there and you say, "Hey, well, I did all of these things for this offer. So the next offer, I'm not going to do any of these things, or I'm going to double down." Sometimes you can overcorrect, right? In a good way, in a bad way, most of the time in a bad way. And so this compounding means you're sort of taking everything that happens from this house and you're rolling that into the next house. And then you're taking the two houses and rolling it into the third house. And you start compounding issues that you had on one transaction, and you're just blanket laying them and canvassing them across every other house you're about to approach. Well, the problem is every seller is different, every listing agent's different, and every house is completely different. You can't take the same things that did or didn't work in that one offer and then just slam them and ram them into the next offer and assume that they will or won't work, whichever way you're kind of going there. So compounding is one of these things where you have to sort of wipe the slate clean a little bit. So again, if you want to just keep wildly overcorrecting, this kind of goes back to the no context. We're just overcorrecting one way or the other. Again, you're going to start to feel like, what am I even doing here? I feel like I'm throwing, darts at a dartboard in the dark room, and I have no idea where they're landing, sticking, and I have no feedback on my form here. So this compounding issue can be really real. So that's kind of the big three of what you shouldn't do. Now let's obviously talk about how can we avoid those things, right? Because those three things are probably the three largest things going to add to buyer fatigue. So let's bring it back up to the top. If we originally start too narrow with our search, and that's going to be a problem, what's the obvious counter to that? Be a little more broad, right? So in your search, what I find a lot of people do is they've been very narrowly focused on just one style of a home, one kitchen style, one backyard style, one exterior property type style, and they just say, like, this is the only way I'm going to be happy, is if I have this one perfect idea of what my house is. And what I find almost every time is as we start the touring process, buyers walk into a home that maybe on paper wouldn't exactly be their first choice, but when they get there, they realize, I could actually see myself here. And that little pivot right there, don't wait until you're exhausted and then your agent's like, "Hey, do me a favor. I know this one hasn't been popping up for you, but please come take a look at this house with me. I really do think it's going to hit a lot of marks for you." Meanwhile, you're exhausted at this point because you hit all the other buyer fatigue issues. Then you go and see it and you're like, wow, this is actually going to make me happy. This is where having an agent who's going to actually work on your behalf is super important. It's one thing early in the search for you to be sending a lot more properties to your agent because really they don't quite know exactly what you're looking for yet. But over time, they start to build a theme for what they say, okay, I'm starting to pick up an idea. They really like these type of spaces or they really like these type of finishes. But I'm noticing that there are 5 or 6 homes on their search that they didn't sell me. Well, now as the agent, they're starting to say, hey, look, I know what you're going for. I know that on paper, these didn't really jump off the page at you, but given everything you've liked and disliked, I really think this is going to be a potentially good option for you, right? Now, I'm not going to take you to a different state or completely outside the realm of your search when you want a rancher and they take you to a 3-story. Like, it's not that kind of difference. It's just helping you understand that there's so many styles out there that you might actually be very happy in something that you weren't initially thinking of. So just be a little bit moored and kind of keep yourself, dare I say, a little more flexible. So that would be sort of my first one. The second one that we sort of talked about was you just came in blind, right? You just met an agent, you saw a house, and you just started seeing house after house after house. And again, I've done that. I've been that agent that took those live Zillow calls. I've met with people who said, I just want to see this house. Either you show it to me or I will find somebody who does. So begrudgingly, we take you and we go show you that house. And then we talk to you about the importance of setting up that first meeting. And you just can't understand that it's important. And so you don't do it. And then you get buyer fatigue and you rip through 5 real estate agents thinking that they're the problem, when in reality, you might have wanted to slow down your search a little bit and actually brought somebody in on your level. So this second part is all about be okay with being educated, and also be okay with not knowing everything about this process. I don't walk into some science lab and assume that I know how to run all the labs and the tests and things like that. I know nothing about it. If I were to come in there for the first time, I'd say, hey, can you show me how you run this process? Can you show me how this works? And I'll try and do it with you to then learn it. It's the same thing when it comes to real estate. Real estate agents, we do this all the time. We're constantly learning about what's going on. Hopefully you have an agent that's actually, staying up to date with what's going on in the market. That might be helpful too. And I would encourage you to ask your agent some of those things. But this is where I say that first meeting, that buyer strategy session, or the buyer consultation, or whatever your agent or what we call it, is so important, because it's going to streamline so much of this. It's going to make your process so much more efficient. I don't want you throwing darts at a wall in a dark room. I want you to be really laser focused on just the properties that are going to work, because you've had such a good communication with your agent and they're able to vet these properties and look for those things that might derail it, even though you didn't quite see it. So anyway, that was kind of a long one there, but really you want to make sure that you are understanding and have researched the process and you understand the context of what you're about to get into. Because as you start going in there, you're going to avoid kind of making rush decisions, and there's going to be a really big misunderstanding if you guys haven't had that meeting up front. And it's one thing to do it up front when there's really no pressure and everything, but when you're on the eve of your highest and best offer being due and you feel like you need to learn a textbook worth of knowledge in order to formally make that offer and feel confident about it, that's the wrong time to learn it. So that second one is all about just staying more educated. Take that first initial meeting with your agent and be okay with maybe not knowing some things up front and taking some advice. That's a big one. This final one, though, is about that compounding. And this is probably my number one takeaway from all of this for buyer fatigue. And it was taught to me by a really good sales trainer a while ago, but it's called being a golden retriever. We all love dogs. I got my dogs. Being a golden retriever means every day I'm going to wake up with a smile on my face and forget about yesterday. I don't care what happened yesterday. When I wake up that morning, I'm going to be happy and excited to see you. And let's go have a great day today. When we talked about what happens with that compounding and not compartmentalizing, you start bringing everything forward from every single house. But remember, every seller is different, every listing agent's different, and every house is different. I have to approach this house with just a sense of new. I can't remember that I just lost that other bid. I can't remember that I wasn't even able to see that house because it went under contract after 2 days on market and they didn't even go to highest and best. And I'm frustrated, right? You got to not take all those things with you and carry it forward with you and start dragging this emotional baggage with you through the whole transaction. The more you can just say, hey, it didn't work out, on to the next. Hey, it didn't work out, on to the next. Now, 2 things. There are some general principles, like on every offer, you have to have at least a price, right? So that's not going away, right? There's some fundamental things of offers and just the approach that you have to do. So that's one thing. I'm not talking about that. But what I am talking about is that every single time you approach this house, you have to do so with a new golden retriever mentality. Take it at face value. Just take the process with this home sort of in a vacuum and assess this home and then make your offer based on it. And if it goes well, great, you've succeeded. And if it doesn't, just learn a little bit. What did I do in that offer that maybe wasn't fully there for the seller? Now, a lot of times you're not going to get that feedback immediately, but if you've been searching for long enough, ask your agent to go back and maybe run some of those closed prices against some of the homes that you had bid on maybe 30 days or 40 days ago and start to get a sense of like, wow, we offered 10,000 over. I thought we had this great offer. I was all depressed that we didn't get it. I found out that the offer that won was actually $40,000 higher than mine. You're going to feel a lot less bad because you're going to say, you know what? There was no way I valued that property at the price these guys got it for. I actually feel better now about not getting that home because I recognize that somebody did it at a completely unreasonable price. So that last one of being a good golden retriever is kind of what I would say here as the hallmark of what's going to keep you being a refreshed, excited buyer day in, day out. Now, a couple of little call to action here that I want to give you some more to chew on after this. So one, what I would say is making a strong offer the first time. Don't learn about it 7 offers in when you're finally getting the hang of this. I actually recorded another video called How to Write the Most Competitive Real Estate Offer. It's on my channel. I'll try and link it here somewhere if I can so that you can go and watch it. So that's the first one I would say. Now, 2 is you do want to make sure that your real estate agent actually is tracking trends. So it's okay to use any agent. I'd love to work with you, but if you're outside my area or if you already have another agent, that's fine. That's totally fine. But your agent should be staying current. There's nothing worse than an agent who's telling 6-month or 9-month or a year's worth old stories. We meet regularly. I do research weekly, and we are always refreshing what's actually happening. Not what did I hear down the grapevine, not what I'm hearing from some sales trainer that's a month behind in their delivery of what's actually going on. What is actually happening and in my local market. I can't tell you how many agents think the world that prices are coming down. I'm like, what are you watching? They're like, well, I'm watching the national news. I said, they're talking about Florida. We don't live in Florida. Why are you telling the wrong information to your buyers? You're telling them that just wait, prices are going to come back down when nothing has shown us that that's going to be the fact, especially in our area, these counties, barring something crazy. But that's the second thing is make sure your agent is actually staying up to this and reach out to me, post in the comments, respond to some of the emails that I send out and just say like, hey, this is what my agent said that they're looking up. Is this good enough? I'll tell you straight up if I think that they're doing a good job, an okay job, or a bad job. And finally, I was able to put together one last thing. And this is something that I have to talk to my buyers about a lot because we sit down and we have that first conversation about, well, what do you want in a house and what do you need in a house? Well, I think a lot of buyers, they kind of make their wants needs. And so what I've done here is just written down a little bit of what I would think is, how do I think about what is a true want and what's a need? And what are some things that I could maybe move out of the needs column, which is making my search too narrow, come back to that first point. What are some of those needs columns that I could maybe stretch into sort of a want? And let me help reframe and get a new perspective on what those things are and what they'll actually do and contribute to my life. And maybe I'm making small things out to be too big and I'm making small things out to be, or big things out to be too small. You know what I'm talking about there. So anyway, let me know if you have any questions on what we've kind of talked about. I appreciate you kind of sitting here and listening to a little bit of this. And I hope that you don't experience the same buyer fatigue that a lot of buyers are having. But this is one of the hardest times to buy a home. Buyer fatigue is a real thing. We haven't had to address it in a lot of previous markets, but believe me, it is here and it is here to stay unless you really tackle these things head on and you do the steps that we talked about. All right, have a great day, and I look forward to catching up with you next time.